Thank you for coming. Welcome. We're trying something different today. I think it's going to go amazing. We have two amazing CF dietitians, Emily Ashe in the pediatric program and Rachel Fuller in the adult program. They will take the show in just a minute, and I will step away. I did want to say, make one more announcement there. The 2023 overall CF patient registry data is available. It's in a nice 4-page handout, summarizes many outcomes that you're interested in. It is on the CF Foundation website. We also are going to email it out early next week, but outcomes are continuing to improve. It's really amazing. Since 2019, the operative word in CF has been hope, and that's still the operative word. So I want you to remember that as you listen to Emily and Rachel. Nutrition is going to change because of modulators, and hopefully they're going to address that. Have a great time. Thanks.
I'll pop up really quick. I'm Rachel Staten with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and I really just want to say thank you to our amazing care teams for putting this on. We're so lucky to have the amazing peds and adults clinics here in Charlotte. And if you guys need anything from us, please reach out to me. You should have my contact information, but we're just thrilled to work with these amazing care teams and all of our amazing families here in Charlotte. And please enjoy, and thank you to Rachel and Emily.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our event. I think we both been so excited because we're putting so much thoughts and planning into this event to try to show you some easy ways to make meals that fit everybody in the family and ways that you can make adjustments depending on what your nutrition goals are. I think Dr. Shellhouse kind of mentioned a little bit the sort of changing landscape of nutrition with modulator therapy. And so we want to make sure we include everybody and even different family members too, because we don't always want everyone to have a high calorie diet. Not everybody's wanting that at the same meal times. So my hope is that we'll show some recipes that you can tweak components of to make it easy so everyone can still enjoy that same meal, but it can fit everyone's individual needs as well.
Yes, so just to kind of give you a layout of what's going to happen today, we're going to begin with a little bit of meal prep by our lovely Rachel. So she is going to prepare a sheet pan dinner. So just a quick and easy way to just use one pan, so less dishes, less things, hopefully. And then again, we're just going to talk a little bit about how you can get your kids involved in the kitchen, what that will look like. And then next we'll move on to a fun snack idea. So we created a recipe to hopefully either give you some snack ideas, but then also something that I personally have a lot of patients that struggle with taking their tricapta with that in the morning and thinking of things to take your tricapta with. So we created a recipe that hopefully alleviates some of that burden and different ones that you can try on a weekly basis. And then last, we'll finish it off with a pizza experience. So using your leftovers, we don't want you to have to cook every single night. So the idea is that you can make one meal and then use those leftovers to make a different meal. That's not the same thing, because I hear that a lot too. A lot of picky kids that want a new meal every single night, even though I don't do that personally. So anyway, so we'll get started.
Yeah. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to say always when you start in the kitchen, definitely want to wash your hands. So you can be thinking about happy birthday or the ABCs when you're washing your hands. Kids probably had a lot of good practice washing your hands in the last couple of years. Be more thoughtful about it. We're going to lots of things that we're going to eat, and so I always think it's a good idea. If you think with any of your fruits or vegetables, do not rinse those. Wash them off before you're going to have those as well. We washed and pre-scrubbed everything that we're going to use today, so we didn't have to use any of the time.
And we thought that might be boring to watch it. But that is a great thing for your kids to get involved with. They can help with, get a vegetable brush, so scrub like your potatoes or peppers and things like that. So that's a good way to get your kids, especially at a younger age, involved in the kitchen.
All right, so for our sheet pan dinner, what I like Emily mentioned, it's great that it's all gonna go on one pan. I'm gonna incorporate a bowl of mine, extra dish, but you can mix everything on the sheet pan itself if you wanna keep it just to one item. First thing we're gonna do is I wanted to talk about chopping some of the vegetables that go into this. Sometimes people are like, well, how do I chop that? Or what's the best way to handle that? And so we're gonna talk a little bit about that as well. All right, so for the first item that we're gonna look at, we're using red bell pepper. If you're choosing this in the grocery store, you wanna find one that's heavy for its size. It feels very light. It's probably not gonna be the one that you wanna go with. And so one that's like, wow, this feels very weighty for what it is. We're using a knife. I always like to encourage you to use a knife that's sharp. If your knife is dull, you're gonna be using a lot more effort to chop things and putting that force, and that can make it a little more likely that you could cut yourself. So definitely something to be careful with the kids. You don't want them to have sharp objects, but when it's time to start cutting, we also don't want them using extra force. Like sometimes with butter knife, they have to use a lot of force with some of those edges. All right.
And with like knife skills with kids, I mean, you guys know your kids the best. So I would say, you know, it's never really appropriate to have a 2-year-old with a knife. Please don't do that. They do make kid-friendly knives, so you can at least get them started a little bit earlier, and they don't have the huge. Yeah, so it is important for them to like learn that skill, but I would say maybe until they're like 10 or 12, and depending on the child, like how mature they are, before they start using knives. We're not trying to encourage knife using.
But like Julie said, your child could be different from another child, and so kind of see where they are on that scale. All right, I also like to have a bowl with a bag over it when I'm preparing things in the kitchen. I put any of my scraps in there, and that way it's not cluttering my space. And I'm also not walking back and forth to the trash can as I'm trying to. This one's very convenient, so if your kitchen's like that, maybe you could do that. All right, so if we're about to chop this pepper, the first thing I want to do is have it flat on its side. You want to choose the side that's the most stable. Whenever you're thinking about cutting something, we're either going to try to make an edge more flat so that it can be a more stable item, or you can find one that's already pretty flat. So we're going to have that nice claw hand so we don't cut our fingers off, and we're going to slice through. This is not waste. We're going to chop more from that. But from the other side, we can just pull out that middle portion. If this was a spicy pepper, this inside pith and the seeds would be the most spicy component. So if you really enjoy heat and you wanted to spice things up, you could use a jalapeno or other items. So now again, I have a really nice flat edge. We can put this down. We can slice through again. For this particular recipe, we're going for wedges. We're going for larger pieces. Some of the other items on the sheet pan dinner are going to be items like potatoes and chicken that are going to take a little longer to cook. So our items like garlic and these peppers, they might not need as much time, so I'm going to leave them a little bit bigger. You can cut, like we said, you can cut this inside portion off, but it's not going to change your flavor too much. If your child's very particular, you might want to cut that off because it can be a little bitter sometimes. Depending on the pepper. Sure. All right. Once again, I'm just keeping my fingers curled up to keep up nice and safe. Like I mentioned, we're not going to leave this pepper to waste, so I'm just going to trim the top parts off. Works really well for that item, the sheet pan dinner that we are using. I meant to mention it before, but when we're thinking about how to handle a knife, I always like to choke up and have my hand on the furthest portion, almost like I'm shaking its hand. And this gives you a lot of control over the knife versus if we were down here, I'm going to choke we're going to be up high. I'm going to put everything in here so that it's really easy to mix. We have all of our items. We're also going to be cutting potatoes. If you wanted to prep your potato ahead of time, it's good to keep in mind that similar to apples, bananas, they can turn brown. So when I was pre-prepping, I put all my potatoes in water. So if you had time one day, you can chop extra potatoes, you can put them in a container, cover it with water, keep it in the fridge until you're ready to use it. This potato, we don't have that flat edge, so I'm just gonna be carefully cutting one side off to make it easy for me, and then I'm gonna slice through. I mentioned before that the potatoes were something that was gonna take a little more time compared to our peppers. If you wanted to have multiple sheet pans, you could have some of your food items separated for the ones that might cook a little differently, like the potatoes and the chicken. Because I want everything on the same pan, I'm cutting them small. But if you're on a time crunch, I put on 2 pans, and that way you don't have to worry about chopping things super small. You can't stack everything up. But if this is a situation where you don't trust your knife, or you're talking in front of people, you might not want to. Add those here. My potatoes, I'm just gonna drain these, ones that I put in water. Another thing I like about a sheet pan dinner is that you can adjust it to how many people are eating, and how much leftover you want. And so if you want to portion or you have a large family, this is a great time that you can go ahead and have all those food items together. We already have our chopped broccoli here that we're going to put in our bowl. Everything's going in together. So we cut things to similar sizes. Some of the items, I personally prefer my broccoli a little crunchy. So I did not cut it super small like some of the other food items. I want those edges to get brown. I want them to be a little caramelized, have that texture to it. If you prefer softer vegetables, you can cut them smaller. Or you could put them on separate pans and let it cook until you're at your desired doneness. So using an onion, you may have experience frying with your onions in the past. Sometimes there's a few things that may help with that. You can freeze your onion, get really cold before you use it. Maybe just have it in the freezer for 10, 15 minutes. You can also rinse it off as well. This is similar to that potato where we don't have that steady side, so we're just going to hold it as steady as we can. I always like cutting the onion from the top to the bottom this way, because it shows you can see those lines really easily, and you can use this as a guide depending on how you want to slice your onion. If you want to make caramelized onions, you can follow each of those divots, and you have really nice even slices. So, really nice wedges today for our sheet pan. We're nearing the end of all of our prep items. If you don't have the time to put this many vegetables in a meal, you don't have to do this number. You can choose 2 or 3 of them. We chose this number because we have this recipes we're using afterwards that use ingredients from this dish. But if you feel, kids, we have the broccoli on hand, we have the onion, that's all I can do today, that's great. That's 2 vegetables there that we wouldn't otherwise have. You could also use frozen vegetables. So if you don't want to chop it all, because that sounds like a lot of work, you could get the frozen fajita vegetables where it has peppers and onions already chopped. You can throw that on your sheet pan with the seasoning that you're going to use. Same thing, similar to our pepper that we talked about. If you're choosing a head of garlic, we want it to be heavy for its size. If it feels really light, it tends to be older, it's going to dry out. It's not one that we want to go with. My favorite way to get the garlic going is I like to smash it. This could be something that you could get the kids involved with a small ramekin. They could put pressure over the garlic and instead of using a knife. That's just what we're doing today. But they could use that. I remember growing up, my mom would give me a little jar, and I would be smushing the garlic. All right, but see, all the peeling is still attached, so it pulls off fairly easy. If you have a hard time with it, you can always run it under water, or you can cut the meat end off as well. It seems like the smooshing didn't make it easy to use. Same thing, putting these together, and slice right through, nice even places. In terms of pesto, this is a pesto sheet pan dinner. You could use, you could make a teriyaki sauce. You could throw that on here. You could choose your favorite sauce if you have you might even use leftover spaghetti sauce if you wanted to. If you don't have any sauces like that, you're quick into a sheet pan, you could use olive oil or avocado oil when they can handle the higher heat and leave that in. We're going to be using this for both the vegetables that we're preparing as well as our chicken. Keeping that separated, always want to remember to do that. That could be something you could tell the kids, don't mix your veggies. And we're just mixing this up. This could also be, like I mentioned, right on the sheet pan. This takes the time to see, well, how much do we want to use? I like everything to be pretty coated, really coated, because that's where our flavor is coming from. And that's what makes vegetables exciting. We add the flavors that we enjoy. We help make them a little bit more like healing and appetizing. Sometimes if at home we try it, say, ooh, do we want more garlic? Do we want more flavor? They do also mention on the recipe that we can add red pepper flakes. Any sort of heat item like that, I like to wait till the end, towards the end of the cooking process. Sometimes those dried herbs can end up burning over time, and that can make it more bitter. So we're trying not to make things bitter. Bitter flavors aren't always what the kids want to have. We don't even like bitter flavors sometimes. You have the dietitian taste buds, and you're just like, yum. The vegetable bitterness. No, this goes for just. Yeah. All right, so this looks great. You can kind of see we've mixed it up really thoroughly. I have a prepared sheet pan. This helps me clean up really easy. You can use parchment paper, or you can use a little foil. And we've already preheated our oven for it was very generous with vegetables. So we're going to have a separate sheet pan for our dinner for the chicken portion. But this can go ahead and the second item we did mention, we do have a meat. If you want to make this a plant-based meal, if you did want to have any chicken involved, we could throw beans on there, get like this crispy chickpeas, have that flavor from the pesto on there as well. That would be another way we could mix it up. You could just do your veggie sheet pan. That sounds delicious. If you were using your chicken, if you were going to cut your chicken, I always like to use a separate cutting board for that, or leave that for last if I do want to use the same one. I went ahead and sliced this into small pieces. If we were going to put it on the same sheet pan, sometimes I even like a little divider or a fold of aluminum foil to keep everything separated. We have a good bit of pesto left. We'll add that to our chicken. I'm not adding any of the oils because pesto has plenty of oil in it. There's no need to add anything extra overall. All right. Like I mentioned, if you wanted to keep this as a whole piece of chicken and just rub it on the sheet pan, keep it easier, you could definitely do that.
As far as for children, we don't recommend them handling raw meat or products, again, until you think that they are mature enough, that they're not going to lick their fingers. So that's a big concern, is getting some kind of foodborne illness from handling raw meat. But they can do things like, we have a rotisserie chicken, so they can help debone that. So they can do things like that to help with the kitchen prep. But as far as handling raw meat, they wait until they're a little bit older so they understand that they can't eat it right now.
Well, that you mentioned the rotisserie chicken. So if you just wanted to roast your veggies and you picked up a rotisserie chicken at the store, that could be another way where we make this an even easier weeknight meal where there's one less thing to think about. They're typically moist, they've got lots of flavor. It's going in the oven. We gave a suggested cooking time, but you always want to, I would like to temp those items. Your chicken needs to be at 165 degrees. One of my favorite kitchen tools is definitely my meat thermometer. I use it all every day. We are preparing those things. So that's our sheet pan dinner in the oven. We're going to wait on that. And while it's cooking, we're going to do a little hands-on.
Yeah, so now we're going to be put to work a little bit. Because I'm the main dietitian. So first, like, okay. So, you each have a bowl in front of you. So if you do not mind, could you bring your bowls up, and then we'll start off with washing your hands first. This is a little bit messy, and you probably will have to keep your hands somewhere. So we'll start here. Don't mind bringing up your bowl. If you don't mind washing your hands. How long do you want to be? All right, so like I said, these are, we're calling them granola bites. So you want to start off with 1 cup of oats. Just go ahead and put that in your bowl. And then 1/4 cup of chia seeds. A 1/3 cup of any kind of nut butter, but today we're using sunflower seed butter just in case we had any peanut butter. Is there almonds in it? There is, in hers, but no, not in it. And this one, no. One cup of those. Perfect. Like we're making or whatever.
She asked us about it. He's like about it. All the waters.
They have to like go there, not there, like that. Let's do anything.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. I think we'll put that where it's not, but. Let's see.
Later, next she ordered something. Like, a little
Yes.
That's like a hard one to
Yeah. Makes sense. Obviously, this page. The Friday. Things get sent to me. So, I'm sorry, yes, it's always.
I was gonna say this guy. Actually, there's one of ours. She did that mom. Absolutely.
This is one of my students. They're the same thing. I know, I actually do the same thing. It's sticking out of there.
But I just said this to myself. No, you don't want me to, it's fine. But water is not, it's like me. No, but if you don't.
This is meals. You know, me too.
Are you like me? I like weird notes about people.
Yeah.
I'm with you, listen.
It's gonna have iceberg and some screens.
Yeah, so like,
She's like, well.
nice.
She's something.
Yeah, I don't want to feel that way.
And the kid says, all right, mom.
I'll try to tell the kitchen.
It's in the door, somebody went in, you can see her back there making a salad, they're sitting in the area.
I mean, if they're generally like adding a little.
I had some of the chairs.
The ones that you have, that's nice. And their tables, yeah. What's with this?
They, three, that all spent with their college education. With us, what they play for.
Yeah, I don't.
I like this kitchen.
You guys have anybody up front?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, no. We're just, we just watch it.
It's in the app, they canvas, or they can't.
I know the other building better than this building. My gastro doctors. Parking next, you can get it out of the
Yeah, take it back to your.
Now.
What do they present?
That's right, yeah, come over here. Think of everything. I think then, if you're ready, like, okay, I can tell your wife to get in the car and bring it around and. And if you heard her say, it's just work on the bottom.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I was thinking when how you like.
So.
Okay.
I don't think hate that.
Email her. No, text me, either one, I just didn't know what you had to do.
Yeah. I've always seen you that.
That was supposed to be.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Scott.
I was trying to remember. It's really going after your shield.
Couldn't see. Are you familiar with like area at all?
Right, send them over, you've never seen the adult one, and that's like this exam.
So you, I haven't seen that, but I'm not Indian realist, so it's literally like, I mean, it's just like great. And I'm looking at it. I can say that that way. So we like the more, yeah, I'm 2 miles from Baltimore, out in the country. We have horses that were out.
That's kind of like.
Oh, you do?
Right, these are the lemon greens.
No. Looking for Bowen out there. It's actually like the hill, like I was one of the local. I mean, that's something you can play. There was a cow. I know. Bill Matthews, that's it. And Monday, I mean, everybody did probably, the better, Michael, I mean, it's like, that kind of out there, so that's how it is for me too, I just live right in the south. Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
2 years ago, we thought we were. Now it's like just 3 weeks of barrels.
Gotta make Beth do something.
Just like, it is Tuesday night. And already like 8:30. Let's save that.
This could be our
I
was stuck on my poster right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to be here for it.
Yeah.
Forever, I was the dummy that sat and sat at the table by myself. Everybody comes from a hole, there's nobody that lives in a hill.
I'm like,
I'm not judging you.
It's very often like it's like out in the middle of the forest. From Texas. It's not been a low to see that.
And you want to report little scenes, and drop in shoulder.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes I like.
It's nuts.
I have no idea.
But,
Once you kind of run it once over here, let me know. That's often one of those things.
yeah, it's good. I mean, it's pathetic. We're so close, but yet so far away.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
But I like to hold it.
Well,
And apparently it's happening like that. It's really not just here.
right.
So.
Actually.
It's looking yummy. Oh, lemon.
well, that's the idea. He's right there.
Sometimes I do that. Now we just drop it in.
Yeah. Oh, it's-
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She said.
So that's the same.
I think
And back when I was starting, like I said, I considered like.
She's always here.
Redneck hospital, you know?
Yeah, see,
Not the country anymore.
it's a that.
It's never much more.
But then it's like, okay. So, yeah, basically decided.
Okay, so this is the base recipe. So the base recipe is just gonna be your oats, nut butter, whatever nut butter you prefer. A third cup of honey, maple syrup, or you can use agave nectar. I would say, in my experience, the honey is better because it's stickier, because you do want it to combine. But if you want to use computer, you just want to use it. A teaspoon of vanilla, a pinch of salt, depends on how much salt you want. And then a fourth a cup of chia seeds or like whatever. So chia seeds, it kind of gives it like a little bit of an extra crunch for the class. But they're also good for fiber. I know we talk a lot about fiber. And so, yeah, but does anyone know what fiber is good for? Poop. It's good for constipation. Sorry, but it's also good for helping to lower your cholesterol, especially dietary soluble fiber, which is in your old-fashioned oats. So there's a lot of good benefits when it comes to fiber. The other thing,
I was like, because you feel full for longer too.
yes,
So it's going in your that snack's gonna leave you feeling satisfied for longer.
yes. Perfect, yes, exactly. And chia seeds also have omega-3s in them. Has anyone ever heard of omega-3s or know what they are? I feel like they're kind of a buzzword nowadays. So they're actually good for brain function, heart health, as well as reducing inflammation. They're technically an antioxidant, so they can protect against cancer, heart disease, as well as Alzheimer's, and decreases blood pressure. So there's a lot of benefits in omega-3s and your fibers, which this has a lot in there. And then your nut butter is going to have unsaturated fats in it, and it helps with less likely to develop type 2. So with any kind of health claim, it doesn't mean like if you eat these foods, you won't get these things. It just means whenever you talk about research, it's less likely the word that they typically like to use. So we like to just point that out whenever we talk about these things. Okay,
So the last thing that we have, because we are making the blueberry muffin one, is our freeze-dried blueberries. So pro tip though, is that you do want to open them first, and you do want to let the air out. So go ahead and do that. Otherwise, the bag will explode everywhere, which might be funny for a teenager, but you might not be able to do it. So, and then you're just gonna smash it.
About some of that. Sure.
I'm a figure. But this is also something that your kids can get involved with, help, it can be something fun for them to do, get more involved. Especially the younger boys, I have 11 and that you don't go wanting to connect. Then about the consistency, you can go ahead and dump that in. And then I think I'm like, to already started stirring, so I want to go ahead and stir. And again, this is something that your kids can do. Because you're not using any kind of heat, so you don't have to worry about them burning down the house. It's something that they can get creative with. That's the beautiful thing about cooking, is that it is kind of an art, as well as chemistry, as well as putting things together. So this is a great way for them to figure out how to measure things, as well as to mix things and prepare things, wash their hands, all that good stuff. So after it is good and combined, what I typically do is make little balls out of them. But the other option is that you can just make a flat sheet of them. So you can just use your container and just press them down and wax paper. Let us know if you need wax paper, if that's the method you would prefer. But since this is a kid-friendly recipe and they love to get messy, I would just, I think the balls are fun. So it will be messy, but kids are messy. So make sure that they wash their hands first before they begin this. Then you just, whatever size, try your fancy. So then you just get a little scoop and you roll it, and you set it aside. And I would say put it in the fridge to let it set a little bit better. And I like them with. And as you see, we did give you a handout with different flavor options, so you can try different flavors.
Are we putting ours in the little containers on the
Yeah.
Okay.
They are for you to take home, so you have a snack ready. And again, this is a great way. I know a lot of kids are not breakfast people, or adults probably too. I am. I love my breakfast. I'm not. So this is another way for them to have something quick to take for their modulators, which have done amazing things. So again, getting your kid involved in the kitchen early will be helpful as far as getting them to try new things. And then cooking in general is a good skill to have, because you'll need to do it the rest of your life. So I do recommend trying to do foods with your children. So another thing that your kid can do, if you can get your kid to pick out recipes, that's another good way to get your kid involved in the kitchen. Pinterest is a great way. And I know that we have a lot of great CF websites that have a bunch of recipes in there. A lot of our wonderful vendors have recipes that they can try. So that's another way that they can get involved that doesn't involve, you know, destroying your kitchen if you don't want them to completely wreck your kitchen. Yeah. And then getting them involved with grocery shopping, like Rachel was saying, looking for the heavy peppers, so maybe they can like pick out the best looking pepper. And also you can get them to, if you have any space to do like a little garden, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. What I have recently started doing is a hydroponic that just sits on my counter. And they can just watch fruits and vegetables, mostly vegetables, but it's good for herbs, but it's a good way for them to like kind of understand like where food comes from. It comes from like the seed and it just doesn't come up in the grocery store. So yeah, there's a lot of fun things to do with kids besides, you know, just trying to force them to eat as much as possible. So yeah.
It's smelling wonderful in here.
Good. That's probably Rachel. Yeah, yeah. Something else that's staying on limits.
Could I come up and wash my hands and?
Yeah. You can come wash your hands.
Yeah, lots of garbage.
Presentation.
Her sister is a school teacher. So she- So it was supposed to be everything.
You feel like that?
I think it depends on the need.
Sure. Yeah.
We wanted to get a lot of those.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's a good question though. Maybe Rachel. Yeah, Rachel knows like.
You practice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To the minute.
It's.
I get up,
Yeah, she got it. Illustrations.
First one to go. Yeah, that has to.
There's some of them I know.
Tastes like nothing.
Yeah. You know, to try to, yeah, yeah.
And you know, he's. Yeah. Wants to be sometimes.
Good question.
It's like a.
Awesome.
Very good. But we waited on the diligence said.
That's helping, and that's.
You never know that, I want you to. Like from their mutation.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Leave there, let you guys.
Some for great tries, but like, something you
Good, good.
Yeah, no, he's has a here Atrium. And they need stuff. There's a lot of, really under, some sort of realize.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but those things help. Yeah, would you do it a third time? Yeah. And they should, yeah. And I don't know, maybe she can do it. But she can come more and they can see you. They do come. What happened there? You're in the picture.
But we can get her.
Yeah.
Don't even have, yeah.
Do it all.
She's like someone. Like,
Oh, that's not true. Now you gotta watch it.
like, years to go now.
Yeah. Like looking at that, like, sweet, naturally sweet.
It's called Union Station.
Yeah, like, remind us.
So we're gonna move on to, Rachel's gonna make a delicious sauce as well as some pizza, so, now you guys can.
So sorry. I've already grabbed our chicken from out of the oven. If you choose to use your food thermometer, which I hope you do, and you also cut your pieces into small chunks. What I like to do is I go ahead and pick up a couple of pieces, those three the biggest ones. And that way I'm able to get the internal temperature since they're so small. And so when I tempt it, we got up to 165. If you're not doing it, try to eat. Keep an eye on how long your meat is cooking. The longer it goes over that, the higher temperature it goes, the drier your meat's gonna be. And so you can kind of keep an eye on it. You tempt it, it's 160. Take the water out, wash it, and then put it back in the oven. Try to get it as close to 165 or 170 between those two. That way we're not drying out. So your meat goes appetizing. All right. So we also put those vegetables in. They also in the thing. And these are a little brown, love. Looks like our onions are soft, but it's not too soft. Yeah, a little bit. We want to hold that up in the camera a little lot. Yeah, sweet. You might notice a lot of steam came out when I was opening the oven. So that was something else you're gonna be cautious about with kids that are cooking. That steam is just as hot. It's hotter than boiling water when we see that steam, so they could get a burn. Think about if you had boiling pasta water and you reached over it. So just be cautious when you open it. I always like to open it a little bit, stand back, let it come out, and then I open it fully just to be safe. How our time would be. So I've redone some roasted veggies. And these are the ones that I'm going to use when we're prepping our pizza because those are really common.
Right there, all the flavors.
The one thing I did with the recipe with the sheet pan dinner was I made it so that we could make a red pepper sauce with some of the ingredients. One of the ingredients of the sauce is nuts. We're using almonds today. But if you have an allergy or you can't stand nuts, that type of nut, you can always change it to walnuts or pecans. You could use peanuts, but they bring a lot of flavor, so that just might clash a little bit with this particular recipe. You could also use seeds, like we're using sun butter. So sunflower seeds, sometimes that's a great option if there are allergies in the home. What's also nice about adding nuts is that we're looking for a way to add calories to a sauce. It's an easy way that is adding some texture in a pleasant way. So what we have that's going to go in that sauce, you can see the recipe I was on a second portion of patient and dinner side. I've got my tongs here so that we can add some of those items. We're going to add some of those bell peppers that we roasted. You can use red. That's what we call it in this recipe because it makes it a beautiful color. But if you only have yellow, if you only have the orange, those are also going to work just fine. I'm adding those peppers, I'm adding onions to this recipe. I'm currently eyeballing it, but I provided some quantities for you on the recipe card. The base of this recipe is going to be a can of fire roasted tomatoes. So something I like about this recipe is that a lot of the components could be things you might already have, or it could be something you go, oh, we could keep that in the pantry to help make a new sauce, change things up a little bit. Add those, like that jar of tomatoes here, and I'm also adding some Italian herb seasonings. You could use fresh herbs. I've got my fresh basil here. No problem. What's also nice is that I'm using lemon juice that we zested those lemons. What are we going to do with the rest of that lemon? Well, we're using it in our recipe today. But you can also use something else that's acidic, like red wine vinegar. It's going to add some brightness to this recipe. This we're tasting food here. And when you're thinking about after we blend it, we want to try and see what it tastes like. And if we're thinking it doesn't need anything, it might be more acid. It might be that it needs salt. Those are some things that I always like to think about. And some smoked paprika. This has a nice smokiness. It's going to be kind of a similar flavor profile to that fire roasted tomato. So if you didn't have any fire roasted tomatoes, but you had tomato at home, you could definitely use that. And the smoked paprika would give us some of that smokiness that the fire roasted tomatoes also have. If you don't have Italian seasoning, but you have leftover pesto, because you made the pesto sheet pan, you can also so this is going to be kind of loud, so I apologize in advance. And we're also adding that 3/4 cup of onions. You can adjust this to fit, like I said, the nuts. You can also adjust the quantity if you just wanted to add a little bit of that. We're just going to pulse this until it's smooth sauce. You don't have a processor at home. Not everybody has one of those. You can also throw this in a blender. You have one of those smoothie blenders. This is a pretty small quantity, so you can put it in one of those as well. Those are almost nicer sometimes because they blend it really well. The consistency of the sauce is a little loose. If we added more peppers, more onions, it's going to be a little thicker. And so if you wanted to use this as a pasta sauce and it was super thick, you could always add pasta water to thin it out a little bit. My favorite use for this dish is I love to make spaghetti squash. I like my spinach squash, and I use my fork. I get those little beautiful stringy pieces. I put this sauce on there, and it's so flavorful for that food. It really brightens it up. So this is the point where we taste it and we go, do I want it spicy? I'd say yes. I'm sharing with everybody else, so I'm going to say no today. Say no. Just to keep it a little more in line with making sure everybody's on board with that as well. But we will taste it though, because we didn't say, hey, is it salty enough? Are the things that we added providing enough flavor for us today? I love the garlic taste that I'm getting from this. I can taste the acidity. If I wanted a little more, we could always squeeze more lemon. So this is definitely in a good space. And here, it's almost giving it a kick. Let's give it a go. So, yeah, okay, so we're gonna have this be able to try. Not just, we're gonna finish this portion. But if you thought it needed salt, if you're not, just not prepared, it's not bright enough, then that's a point where that's when I think we might need a little more salt. All right, so we've got this made. We're going to talk about making our pizza with those leftovers that we have available on our pans. For that sheet pan pizza, we have this cool handout where it's almost a checklist. So the kids could be involved and say, well, what sounds good tonight? Almost like a menu. And they can check off. You could check off and make it your grocery list as well. A way to get everybody involved and make sure we're not missing anything. So what I like about the sheet pan pizza is that it's fast. It's also a good way that you can kind of tailor it to what your nutrition desires are. Do we want to have a gluten-free crust? Is that something that we desire? We could choose one of those. We could choose the corn tortilla, an option. If you prefer that crunchiness, that's also a good place to choose that tortilla over something else. Now, if you have extra time and you want to make your own pizza dough, definitely can do that. But we're trying to think of things that make that evening meal at home more accessible. And maybe so you have more time to have that family meal so you can sit down together and enjoy this. One of my favorite things is to use made naan. It's super fluffy, it's gonna be delicious, super flavorful. I'm gonna have two of those tortillas options. These are flour tortillas today. The other corn options that were available were those 6-inch. So then you might say, oh, I love volume. I like to have a lot of food when I'm eating. And so those 6-inch might be a way to pile on lots of toppings and have multiple options. All right. So my favorite thing to think about when I'm making a pizza is that we want every bite to be the same. I'm not a huge fan of that huge crust left from making this style. So I'm going to take the toppings to the edge. Using the spatula, we're going to pile that on. You could use that red pepper sauce we just made. You could use the pesto we talked about. You could just use some olive oil and sliced garlic like we talked about earlier. If you wanted to do that, I would slice the garlic, let it sit in the olive oil for maybe 10, 15 minutes so that olive oil infuses with the flavor of the garlic. So anybody ever says dinner was boring? Think about how you flavor those food. Somebody, they weren't talking to me, but I thought they were. And they said food was bland. And I was like, wait, about 70 spices in my cabinet. Food's never going to be bland. There's always a way we can make it more flavorful or add something to make it more exciting. Sometimes it's fun to be adventurous, but sometimes you want to know, well, what do you like? And sometimes you might not know what you like until we try some of those things. Or maybe you have your favorites. You know, I was thinking of some things I'd want to keep on hand in my cabinet. It might be that I always have garlic powder because that can go on almost anything. And it pairs well with most flavors as long as we're in that savory side. We mentioned that Italian herb seasoning, and that's usually a blend of basil and oregano. Sometimes there's some rosemary in there. Very, very friendly flavors. Sure. We've got lots of cheese options without pizza to be. But if you don't like cheese, you can use non-dairy cheese. You could go cheese-free and make it this delicious flatbread. Maybe it's going to be more like bruschetta, where we have all those flavors on top and maybe not as much cheese. This is a good way to use over that leftover broccoli. Okay. maybe family, people in the household aren't always on some of those veggies, so go with the one that they like, and maybe they have their own individual flatbread. So if we're adding any meats to this, we mentioned before that when they get hot or too hot, they can dry out a little bit. So you might want to choose to put those on that bottom layer. That way we're going to put the cheese over it and it's not going to dry out. All right, so we're just going to throw some of the veggies on here. Well, we're going to make a mix because everybody's going to try some of them. And if you don't enjoy some of the things that we made today, option when you're sure. If you are using other meats, I always like to use fully cooked meats. This is only going to be in it until it browns. We don't want to be thinking, oh, it's going to need fully cooked. We need to think about those things right now. Once we have these dressed and ready, we followed their checklist, we've added all the heavies, those protein items. Then we'll put it in the oven, that same 425 degrees, and we put heat pan down. And then
Cheese, everyone.
so I have a movie magic one already made. We did one with the tortilla, and we did one with our flatbread. I let the edges get nice and crispy, browned on there as well. This is a good time that we can put some of those toppings we have at the bottom. Maybe it's fresh herbs, vigorous with olive oil. If we're looking for them to have a little extra calories, but not more volume, we could take that pizza sauce and we could add a little olive oil to that. It's not going to change the texture too much, but it's going to give us a few extra calories from that. I did bring some fresh basil from home. One of my favorite things to do with fresh herbs, I like to do a chiffonade. It's a fancy word, just slice it into thin. So I thought I might show that. If we had time, I don't think we've got it wrong. So I take those big leaves and I stack them up right on top of each other. The biggest leaf on the bottom. And then I like to roll that up. Don't roll it too tightly. We want it tight enough so that you're only going to have a little portion of it. And we're going to cut that on our cutting board. I'm going to be off camera because I run out of my camera space. So I apologize if anybody's on there watching. I would say to encourage you to treat those gently when we continually slice them. Over the same time, they can bruise them really easily. So you'll see I've got these, and I'm just going to take that knife and gently slide right through. This is also a time where you might notice if your knife is not sharp. So if you notice that you're bruising your basil, parsley, cilantro, you might want to start with my knife. I like this method of topping because it's beautiful ribbons. And this is something great to put on pasta dishes, a pizza that we made, any of those items. Also makes the room smell really nice. We're talking about lemon smelling nice, the garlic, those onions, everything smelling delicious. Smelling in that base, that beautiful smell. But yeah, that's one of my favorite ways to prep my herbs without them getting through. So that nice smooth motion straight through versus that sawing motion. So we got our pizzas in the oven, and I feel like we're at a place where this is all we're going to present for you with a food demo. So any questions? I guess.
If there's anything online.
Sure.
What kind of like, not nice brands, but when you're cooking, which knife do you recommend using? Like, is there a knife you use the most, or, you know what I'm saying?
So I'm a big chef knife fan. I can do it for I can use it for anything with that. And small paring knife for some of those small jobs where you don't want to slice your meat with a huge knife. Those are my two go-tos. I like one that fits your hand. If you mentioned before you were shopping, might need to shop for a knife soon. You want to feel that handle and see if you have smaller hands, you don't want one with a really rough handle. That's going to fit nicely. Like I said, like you're going to shape its handle. Nice to meet you.
When you have the fresh herbs like this, do you usually recommend putting them on after you've cooked?
Yes,
Like-
yeah. It's gonna bruise, it'll shrink down. It could burn, like you mentioned with some of those dry spices. So I would always put them in.
Okay.
That hot piece is really gonna help brighten that flavor up for that hot item.
Like that rolling idea.
I don't know, it's really good.
Yeah. I'm gonna do that.
Let's see if that, I don't think, you know, it's okay.
That's good. That's very important.
That's what I was gonna say. Whenever I'm in clinic with my clients, we always used to talk about food. So this is so much fun for me today. We get to touch and smell and experience the food together. Because I think that's so much versus just making suggestions or saying, well, why don't you try this? Well, now we can talk about trying it, and then you actually can try it and see that it's fun.
Yes, that's from store, little packs. I don't know. And I've heard that you put them in water and it helps them. Is that true?
Yes, sometimes I cannot provide them, so I have mine, I picked these this morning. And so I put this in a little water, made sure the ends were gonna hang out there, and that helps keep it bright and fresh. I don't usually keep this in the fridge unless your house is really warm. Maybe you're pulled off on the air conditioning. So keep them on the countertop, no problem. You guys see they cut these this morning, they're still bright. But even if you put your cilantro, which is one that actually kind of droopy sometimes, I might trim the ends, make them fresh, and then I'll put them in just like cut flowers. Think about how they stay nice and bright and happy when they're in that water.
I usually stick it in the refrigerator and I'm like, oh.
It pulls out, it just a lot of moisture, and then you can start looking at it faster.
I have a question, just a comment. I like a really good sharp knife. Our knives aren't that great, but there's some guys at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
That will sharpen them, not too expensive. They do a really quick job, so I'll just take them over there sometimes. The one that's over, off Tabola.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, under, in a little barn, they're at the end, they have a stand. They're basically there pretty much throughout the week, whenever it's open. So. you know.
Oh, thank you.
The Mark Matthews. I have seen them, yeah. So I would there every, I don't know, yeah.
I did have this.
That's it.
You see those really fancy ones that are all different colors and stuff like that? I don't see, because you prefer like stainless steel or are the fun ones just as good?
So I have a fun one. I mean, we were talking before about how sometimes the fun ones they have. Things are not usually the most rusty. Right. Water to get stuck in some of those areas. You're really careful. Your knives don't dry, so they put away. So there's an issue. Opposite, we're just being not that you know. Oh yeah, it's nice. Go for it. Once for the end, it's starting to nice. But yeah, so those are fun. But definitely think about your budget. You don't have to pay high dollar for a knife. If you're keeping it sharp, then that's the main thing. I don't have one of those little knife sharpeners. I think mine just was not a tri-stone, and it's complicated. It's one where you can just slide it right through and holds it at the right angle. So something that kind of manageable to keep on hand. Those ones at the farmer's market are nice. So if you kinked your knife, or it kind of has some divots where the avocado hit too hard. Where it needs to be straightened, then taking it to that market where they're going to use that tri-stone and it's very angled, and that's going to be something else. If you've ever seen those, I one in here. But when there are things that straighten the edge of the knife, you can think, I can't think of any because they're just on my brain. But usually, what?
The little leather knife.
No, usually it's the metal, and then you use it to sharpen your knife. Usually it comes with blank blocks. It doesn't sharpen it, but it just flattens that edge.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either. I thought that's exactly what it was for. That was a nice one.
Your steel, so that's the word I wanted to say, is your steel is what it's called, and that helps to flatten that edge. So if this was my knife, and I did lots of chopping, and it's kind of got those divots over time, that steel can help to straighten them out a little bit. So it doesn't sharpen, it just kind of puts it back in that shape that more than like it was originally.
And then I think the other thing with knives is like the food service brand, if you look for NSF, that might be another way to like, because those are food service grade types of products. I know they sell them on Amazon. I've heard of, I wish I would have remembered exactly which one it was, but yeah. So that's another one to kind of think about whenever you're shopping.
Just to think of the times. I'd love to ask more questions, but also have our panel speakers.
Yeah.
And some of them are virtual, so I don't want to be, I still want to be conscious of their time. So,
So thank you, Rachel and Emily. That was amazing.